know that moment when you're sitting somewhere, maybe on the couch after dinner or in your car after parking, but you don't get out yet? The lights outside are dim, the world feels paused, and there's this quiet recognition that you've reached the end of something, but not in a catastrophic way. Nothing's really fallen apart. You just don't feel like continuing the same dance anymore. You're not broken. You're just quietly done. It's strange because from the outside, everything seems fine. You still show up where you're supposed to. You still answer messages. You laugh when you should laugh. You function. But inside, there's this unspoken withdrawal, like the inner thread that once pulled you forward has gone slack, and you don't even want to tighten it again. People talk about burnout, heartbreak, depression, but this is quieter, softer. It doesn't scream for help. It just mutters, "I think I'm finished here," and waits for you to notice. Sometimes it shows up as the subtle sigh before saying yes to something you don't care about, or when a friend tells a story you've heard before and you nod even though you're no longer really present. You don't even feel impatient. You just feel like you don't belong in the noise. There's no anger in it, no defiance, just a kind of silent clarity. You stop chasing what used to feel urgent. The argument you could have won doesn't matter anymore. The applause doesn't mean anything. Even the need to be understood fades a little. And that's confusing, isn't it? Because we're taught to diagnose every quiet feeling, to name it, solve it, treat it. But what if this is not a problem at all? What if it's an instinct? Yeah, and the kind of mental frost that forms only when a season is truly over. Sometimes the mind shuts the lights off, not because it's broken, but because it knows you've stayed too long in a room that no longer fits. There's research that says when people reach emotional saturation, when the same neural circuits are overused without reward, the brain begins to gently power down the desire pathways. It's not punishment, it's protection, like nature pulling resources away from something that no longer grows. You might notice it in small ways first. The music you used to love now feels like static. The things that once triggered excitement now register as neutral. You scroll past joy, past outrage, past everything. Not numb, but indifferent. That's how being quietly done begins. It feels like the volume of life turning itself down, notch by notch, until the world is almost silent but not empty. You can tell the difference between silence and emptiness. Silence has texture. Emptiness feels like absence. When you're quietly done, things still exist. You just stop trying to make them mean more than they do. It's a subtle rebellion, one no one else sees. You still show up to work, but your heart stays home. You still say, "I'm fine," because you are. Technically, you're not falling apart. You've simply stopped pretending there's something to fix. I think about how, in nature, animals sometimes lie down when they're done running, even if the race hasn't ended. They're not giving up. They're listening to something older and truer. Maybe this quiet finishing is the human version of that. There's a tenderness in that realization, a kind of secret understanding that not every ending announces itself. Sometimes it just exhales. You might feel moments of guilt, wondering if you're supposed to care more, give more, fight harder. But who told you that staying past your honest capacity was noble? Maybe letting go quietly is its own kind of integrity. Because somewhere along the way, the world taught us that being okay means being enthusiastic, resilient, endlessly energetic. But that image was always too loud. Not all healing roars back to life. Some healing moves inward, folds itself into stillness, and refuses to perform. You can't measure this kind of stillness in productivity or joy points. You measure it in the moments when you stop rehearsing your thoughts mid-conversation, when you no longer need to justify your exhaustion, when you realize you're not chasing meaning, you're digesting it. We rarely talk about that digestion phase, the part where you're not creating or grieving or thriving, you're just being. Even cells pause after dividing. The brain needs space between signals to reset. It's built into every natural system. The pause between waves, the breath between words, the winter between blooms. And yet, we treat our quietness like a malfunction. We reach for explanations. Burnout, fatigue, existential crisis. Maybe. But sometimes it's just the quiet honesty of admitting to yourself, "I've seen enough for now." You still love things in your own understated way. You still notice the small beauty, the curl of steam from a mug, or how the light catches dust in the air. But you don't cling to it like proof that you're okay. You just let it pass through. That's how you know you're not broken. Even stillness still lets light in. When you tell people you're tired, they try to fix it with rest. When you say you're unmotivated, they offer goals. But this isn't that kind of tired. It's not about depletion. It's about completion. There's a quiet dignity in recognizing that something inside you has reached its natural stopping point. Maybe this happens when you've stretched your empathy too far, when you've absorbed too many stories, too much noise, and your mind starts putting up gentle walls. Not out of coldness, but care. Your system whispering, "We're done collecting now, let's just exist." That might look detached to other people, but that detachment is sometimes the only way to stay whole. You can't keep handing out pieces of yourself just because you're afraid of being misunderstood. So you retreat, not in resentment, but in preservation. There's neuroscience that says prolonged emotional engagement activates the same stress patterns as physical exertion. Your brain doesn't know the difference between lifting weight and lifting worry. So when it goes quiet, maybe that's just your biology asking to set something down. And maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe you've simply grown out of certain versions of yourself, out of conversations, expectations, cycles that no longer have nutrients for you. Growth doesn't always look like expansion. Sometimes it looks like retreat, like a tree reclaiming its sap in winter. But this doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means the caring gets distilled into fewer, more deliberate places. You choose silence over reaction, distance over noise, peace over performance. And while the world may misread that as apathy, you start to feel something sacred returning, sovereignty over your own energy. Sometimes someone will notice the change and ask, "What's wrong?" And you won't know how to explain that nothing's wrong, and that's the bewildering part, because everything around you functions, but it no longer feeds you. The flavors don't land. The laughter doesn't echo. You're not sad. You're not fine. You're just elsewhere mentally, like watching your old life through glass. And yet, beneath that distance, there's a small relief. Because you're no longer negotiating your worth through motion. You've finally stopped running on the treadmill of significance, and you're standing still. You can see the machinery now, the way people keep spinning, performing, posting, proving, and you just don't want to anymore. Not because you've given up, but because you've outgrown the need to be constantly seen. It's a quiet graduation, one no one applauds. You're not collecting achievements, you're collecting understanding. You stop trying to make meaning and instead start noticing it, how it forms naturally, like condensation on a window. Sometimes when the weight of done sits heavy, you might wonder if it's loneliness, but it's not. Loneliness aches. This is different. This feels like peace layered with fatigue, like you've finally turned down life's volume to a level where you can hear your own thoughts again. And those thoughts aren't always profound. Sometimes they're just, "I don't have the energy to care about this conversation," or "I love you, but I can't meet you where you are right now," or maybe just, "I need things to be quiet." You don't owe anyone a louder signal than that. Your quiet is still communication. It's your mind's way of saying the performance is over. And if you listen long enough, you might realize that being quietly done isn't the end of feeling. It's the end of forcing. There's grace in that. The kind of grace that comes when you accept that not every season of aliveness demands fireworks. Some seasons only require honesty. Maybe you've noticed this too, that people fear your calmness once you stop reacting. They confuse it with coldness. But it's not that you don't feel. It's that you've stopped translating every feeling into an action. Some emotions deserve to exist without an audience. It's okay to be a little incomplete in other people's stories, to stop explaining yourself, to step aside from the noise and trust that the pause you're in isn't emptiness. It's incubation. Because even when you're quietly done with something, you're quietly beginning something else. Not a project, not a plan, just a quieter state of being that doesn't need validation. You'll start noticing it in subtle ways. How your conversations shift, how your priorities thin out. You don't chase closure anymore, you just allow endings to stand unedited. That alone is freedom. And maybe one day, when you look back, you'll realize that this phase, the one that felt like nothing was happening, was when everything real was rearranging itself beneath the surface. That's what being quietly done really is. It's the mind stepping out of noise to make space for truth. It's not resignation, it's recalibration. So if that's where you are, if you feel that quiet finality settling in behind your ribs, don't rush to wake yourself back up. Don't demand sparks. Just notice that something deep within you has finished what it came to do, at least for now. You're not broken. You've simply reached the part of the story where silence starts speaking for you. And maybe that's okay. If any of this feels familiar, maybe just sit with it for a while. You don't need to fix it or even name it. Just know that you're not the only one leaning back from the noise, choosing not to chase what no longer calls you. Some endings don't need applause, they just need space.